Hello and welcome to StoryMode, where we look at video game stories and see what works, what doesn't, and why. I'm Cyphro, and I'll be your host as we delve in. Just a word of warning, there are going to be massive spoilers. The first game on the chopping block is Dragon Age Inquisition. Dragon Age Inquisition is a fantasy role-playing game in which you raise and lead an army to face a foe that threatens to destroy the world as you know it. I enjoyed the game, but that doesn't mean it's perfect. Let's see how the story holds up. Inquisition starts off on a high note. The title screen immediately tells us what's going on. The Mages and Templars, in the midst of their civil war as established in previous games, are walking to a conclave to try and bring an end to the hostilities. Then, the moment you start the game, you know that it failed spectacularly. In one swift motion, they establish the central conflict, the tone of the story, and the stakes at play. It promises that whatever's going on, it's going to be big. The start of the game keeps things going by throwing you straight into the action. You learn that you're the only survivor of that explosion, and you soon join a mad dash to the giant hole in the sky to try to close it. It keeps the action high and the stakes clear. If you don't succeed, there's going to be big trouble. However, to keep things moving, the game throws in some things that don't quite gel, like how Cassandra makes a huge leap of logic.
It may be the key to stopping this, but there isn't much time.
Or why everyone suddenly turns to you to make important tactical decisions.
How do you think we should proceed?
Now you're asking me what I think.
But the main purpose of the opening is to hook the player, and Inquisition does this by throwing you into a big action set piece. You team up with a ragged band of dudes, and some old faces, punch a demon in the face and stick your hand in a dimensional breach. However, you're not strong enough to close the big rift, so you stop it from growing and take a nap. Everyone realizes that you're the only one who can save them, and so the Inquisition is formed around you. This is a powerful moment, and it says a lot with no actual words being spoken. You're shown the seed of something great, a ragtag army in a frozen border town. The determination of those you see, and Cassandra's purposeful stride make you realize that you've been swept up in something far larger than yourself. You step out into the improvised war camp and think, hell yeah, I've got a whole army at my back! Except, you don't. One of Inquisition's biggest failings is that it places you at the head of a powerful organization, but then that organization never really manifests in terms of gameplay outside the war table. From the table, you can send people out to do missions for you and choose how to tackle them. But ultimately, the resolutions and rewards for those missions are almost pointless. Most of them simply get you a small amount of influence or a couple of resources, most of which you could gather yourself in a few seconds. The fact that the war table missions have such a minimal impact on the gameplay and overall story mean that the decisions there lose weight. And coupled with the hassle of having to return to the war table all the time, this results in the stories being told at the table failing to generate much interest, even the ones that take place over multiple missions. Why should I care about who rises to the head of some Orlesian house when I'll never see them, and the only difference between them is a reward of 30 influence or a sword I'll never use? The main reason that the war table fails to deliver much in the story is surprisingly simple. Text. The table only presents you with text entries for any of the side content that pops up in it, which makes it difficult for the players to invest in. Other games like Sunless Sea or most visual novels pull this off by making text the primary method with which you engage with the game, and the world. But in Inquisition, you engage with it like this.
Try to take out that enchanter quickly.
It's this disconnect that makes the war table stories fall flat. The player expects to receive the story through action and dialogue, and these blobs of text break that expectation. It's inconsistent with the established vehicle of the story. While some of the missions at the war table are well written, they lead to the war table's other problem. All your choices there are empty. For choice to be a good story element, it has to have narrative weight behind it. there must be tangible consequences for what you do. It's fine to give the player a choice and then take it away from them, or just create the illusion of choice, but when the choice itself is completely meaningless to you, why clutter up the game with it? This isn't storytelling, it's administration. This might seem like a nitpick, but the war table represents the Inquisition as a whole. And if the war table is narratively meaningless, what purpose does the Inquisition serve? Indeed, there are only 2 times in the game when the backing of the Inquisition is actually important. When you lay siege to the Grey Wooden Castle and when you finally attack the villain's army. For everything else, you are on your own, with no good reason to be. Why do I have to fight dragons with a small group of guys when I have hundreds of soldiers waiting at the castle? Adhering to this traditional RPG structure of running around with 4 guys may maintain the standards set by other games in the series, but it means that the Inquisition cannot contribute more to gameplay than acting as a home base. You can make some pretty nasty choices at the war table, and no one ever calls you out on them. Indeed, they never come up again. Soon the game moves on to the first quest area, the Hinterlands. Here, the land is being torn apart by the Mage Templar civil war. People fear for their lives as roving bands from both sides of the conflict ravage all in their paths. Don't they? While the conflict is present throughout the area, there are a couple of factors which undermine the Civil War's impact. First, the MMO-inspired structure of the area. It's hard to take the war seriously when its combatants are standing around like a group of particularly fanatical murlocs just waiting for you to kill them. They fight one another on occasion, but you soon start to think of them as MMO monsters or just quest mobs, and then you no longer see them as human, and as a result, soon no longer care about their goals or their war. The central conflict of the game, or at least what we've been told is a central conflict, gets boiled down to grinding mobs. The second reason the Civil War fails to make much of an impact is something I alluded to earlier. The hinterlands look really, really nice. This is a beautiful area, rife with nature, flowers, deers, goat, whatever. You can climb cliffs, go horse racing, check out the local tourist attractions, visit the pub. It's quite rare that you see any actual evidence of the war going on. Even the central town of the area is meant to be teeming with refugees, but seems like quite a pleasant place. Beyond the occasional fetch quest saying, "Oh yeah, we're totally running out of food, guys," it feels like the war is an annoyance rather than something truly threatening and oppressive. It just doesn't feel like a war zone. From the scale of the conflict and how everyone keeps going on about it, it should look less like this and more like this. What's odd is that BioWare has pulled this off before. In Mass Effect 3, the docks of the Citadel's main purpose was to show you the impact that the Reaver invasion was having on the people of the galaxy. In one small area you could see 100 tiny tragedies, refugees huddled together asking about loved ones, wondering how life could ever go back to normal. It showed you the war better than any action sequence and reminded you exactly what you were fighting for. Inquisition's Civil War? Not so much.
Look, kid, if you can talk an apostate out of her pants in the middle of a war, you've got a gift.
Eventually you make a call about whether to side with the Mages or the Templars, which leads to some pretty cool story moments. Choosing the Mages introduces you to Dorian, a confident, suave and flamboyant Tevinter mage.
Good! You're finally here! Now help me close this, would you?
Siding with the Templars lets you meet Cole, a mysterious spirit who can peer into the hearts of men. Both these choices lead to very interesting parts of the game, and it does a good job of making both of the choices equally valid. One downside is that if you pick the mage route, Cole doesn't get the strong introduction he needs to establish his character.
If you can explain this, I'm listening.
Whereas Dorian is charismatic enough to be cool even with a rushed introduction, Cole is a spirit who is by nature forgettable. If you don't pick the Templars, it's very easy to dismiss Cole entirely.
I'm here to warn you. Fashionably late, I'm afraid.
The choice between the Mages and the Templars is arguably the most important one in the whole game. The outcome of the entire war hinges on your decision. But what does this actually mean for the game and the story? Well, it affects who appears in this cutscene, who you're fighting for the rest of the game, and who's gonna stand around your base doing literally nothing.
I trust everything is well with the mages?
Now, I know that game development is a tricky business and not every game can be Witcher 2, but this has basically no effect on the narrative. Sure, someone will occasionally say,
The Mage Rebellion joins the Inquisition.
and the ending slideshow will have a different frame or two, but the following story is barely affected by the outcome of one of the largest civil wars in Theda's history. That seems wrong somehow, doesn't it? In any case, once you make your choice, you get to the best part of the game. You and your new allies seal the breach with surprising ease. Yay, you just won a video game! Right? Nope. After hours of picking herbs and chasing goats, shit has finally gone real. Guys are in your base, everything's on fire, and just when you start to gain an advantage, they drop an archdemon on you. And all this action and danger and fire and destruction serves as a vehicle to introduce this asshole. This is one of the coolest introductions of a villain I've seen in a while. Before he even says anything, he's a badass. His army's beating the crap out of yours, he's twice your size, he's got a cocking archdemon on his side, but all of this isn't what makes him dangerous.
I once breached the Fade in the name of another to serve the old gods of the Empire in person. I found only chaos and corruption, dead whispers. For 1,000 years I was confused, no more. I have gathered the will to return under no name but my own, to champion withered to winter and correct this blighted world. Beg that I succeed, for I have seen the throne of the gods, and it was empty.
Corypheus lays out his motivations in a couple of quick but well executed lines. But they do more than that. They tell us that he knows that what he's doing is right. He wants to become a god not for his own sake, but because he believes that the world needs one, and he's the only person with the potential to become one. Everything he does is justified by this core belief. And he doesn't see you as a threat. You grab a sword, he doesn't flinch. He doesn't smirk, he doesn't even react. Then you drop an avalanche on him, and he's like, whatever, Dragon Bro's got my back. Corypheus' introduction sets him up as a fantastic villain, and part of what makes it so effective is that he is a mirror for you as the player character. Both of you lead large organizations with powerful armies, both of you are gathering power from all over Thedas, and both of you are fighting to make the world a better place. The only difference between you is that you have very different ideas of what that looks like. Also, face crystals, that's another difference between them. You get away, and then slowly stagger back to the other survivors. After the heated battle at Haven, this scene works wonderfully. The quiet trek through the mountains and the tunnels gives you time for the adrenaline to wear off, and lets you reflect on what just happened, and how the balls you meant to reform the Inquisition. Much less fight a guy with an army of lyrium junkies and an archdemon. You just got your ass kicked, and the game makes sure that you know it. You make it back to the other survivors, and the atmosphere is hopeless. You see the Inquisition at its lowest point, defeated, demoralized, and dumbfounded. Individually, nobody knows what to do, but through their faith in the Maker, in each other, and in you, the Inquisition is able to pull together and keep moving. The lowest point for the Inquisition makes for the highest point in the story. In a game of badass warriors, deadly assassins, and unstoppable juggernauts, you get to see them vulnerable.
The night is long and the path is dark. Look to the sky, for one day soon the dawn will come.
Then, Solus shows you the way to Skyhold, the foreboding mountain stronghold that serves as your headquarters for the rest of the game. And this is where the game begins to fall apart. Let's talk about pacing. There's something called the tension and release cycle. In a story, you want to organize pacing so whenever there is a period of great excitement, you let events simmer down and give the characters and players time to breathe. If a game is all tension all the time, it's easy for the tension and action to lose meaning, and the experience can become dull. If there's no tension, the story can also become dull. Tension and release. Tension and release. After the Battle of Haven, the game needs to cool off, and it does this very well. It brings you to Skyhold, a beautiful and amazing castle, and lets you explore it, talk to your followers, do damage control, and just see what's going on. This period of low tension is crucial to the pacing of the story. But then it goes on. And on. And on.
But I still need to gather quillback intestines and a phoenix's tail feather.
Once you reach Skyhold, the game slows way down. The game doesn't just let you take your time, but feels designed to stretch it out for as long as possible. The MMO-style design of the areas is partly to blame. People often say that the game picks up after you leave the hinterlands, but the sad truth is that every area is the hinterlands. While occasionally an area will have some interesting elements, there is not much of a story to any of these zones. There's not a lot going on in Stormreach. There's some collectibles in the Oasis. Well, you can drain a lake in Crestwood, and that's pretty cool, but once you do, you kind of just splash about at the bottom of the lake. Well, there is a civil war raging in the Exalted Plains. Surely that's got to be exciting.
The Civil War is over.
Oh, okay. What about...
This space has nothing but... space.
At this point, I think disappointment was an old friend.
While there is technically a lot of content in each area, it's not that interesting, and very little of it affects the plot at all. In Dragon Age Origins, each zone had a story behind it. The Circle of Magi has been taken over by demons. The dwarves are holding an election. Dalish elves are being wiped out by werewolves. Every zone in Origins had some cool thing going on that you wanted to get involved in. In comparison, the areas Inquisition have...
Nothing to report, sir. Nothing to report, sir. Nothing to report, sir.
They mainly serve as hubs in which to grind power, which seems like a massive missed opportunity. You just drum up enough power to unlock the actual interesting parts of the game. And why is all this pacing stuff important? Simple. Remember this guy?
Beg that I succeed. For I have seen the throne of the gods, and it was empty.
Well, be ready to forget him. After his epic appearance at Haven, he just takes it easy. Maybe he's overconfident and doesn't see you as a threat, but he literally does nothing until you trigger him to. This wouldn't be so bad, but there's so much that the player is asked to do that has nothing to do with the plot. The huge threat that was Corypheus simply fades into the background once you realize that he's operating on your timetable. In Origins, if you dicked around too long, when you got to Redcliffe, everyone was dead. In Inquisition, Corypheus doesn't assassinate the Empress until you're there to stop him. He doesn't go to the Elven Ruins until your entire army is there to block it. He never wins anything ever again, which saps from his strength as a character and a villain. He goes from being an unstoppable badass to some frustrated guard stomping on his hat. The tragedy is that this would have been so easy to fix. Have Corypheus be doing something in all those areas, or just let him get a couple of hits in. Maybe you can't stop the assassination, and instead it's about picking up the pieces and stopping Orlais from falling apart. Have his minions do something other than stand around waiting to be killed. Have him attack bloody Skyhold! Look at this thing! This is the perfect place for a battle. Sheer walls, jagged cliffs, armies clashing against each other. A second round against your nemesis on more even footing. When you arrive, your guys even talk about how cool it would be to fight there.
If Corypheus strikes again, we may not be able to withdraw. I wouldn't want to.
You can even upgrade Skyhold with mage towers and shit. Sure, they're decorative, but they don't have to be. Why give us this awesome toy castle and then not let us play with it? Between the sluggish pace and the neutered threat, you can't help but lose interest in the actual plot of the game. Which is unfortunate, because the plot's not bad. After you get to Skyhold, there are only 3 main missions remaining. The first of these is an assault on the Grey Warden Castle. Casting the Grey Wardens as enemies is very effective. It breaks away from the usual good versus evil struggle by making you fight another group of heroes. These are people who have done more to protect the world than you have, and you have to declare war on them if you want to keep them out of Corypheus' hands. You fight your way to the Warden Commander, who turns out to have been tricked by Tevinter Mage into doing blood magic and other fun stuff. As a quick aside, I know that these guys are desperate, but aren't Tevinter Mages universally mistrusted? Why does everyone let in random Tevinter Mages without asking any questions?
You have remarkably little here on early Tevinter history.
Oh, never mind. Anyway, you convince the Wardens that the Tevinter Mage telling them to sacrifice all their men is a bad dude. Then you take a spill and teleport everyone into the Fade. The area that follows has some of the best storytelling in the game. And the best part is what it doesn't tell you. It's what the game hints at, but never reveals, that really gets your imagination fired up. We discovered that when we got the glowing hand action, something was taken from us, and has been stuck in the Fade. Namely, your fear. This raises interesting questions about the preceding events and the nature of the Fade. Is your character's success and blind courage simply a result of them having been stripped of fear? It's a small point that raises big questions about the world. Like showing the player the tip of an iceberg, you only get a glimpse of it, but you know there's a lot more there. You also meet the spirit thing that saved you at the start of the game, and you don't really know what that is either, but you're given enough hints that you can make some interesting guesses.
But are you her, or some kind of Fade remnant of her, or a spirit imitating her?
But the best part of the whole area is tucked away in a corner and can be missed entirely. This graveyard. The tombstones represent your party members, and with just a couple of words they describe their greatest fears. This serves as some of the quietest and most potent character building in the entire game. Since each of your party members is a professional badass, it's rare for them to show any weakness. These tombstones give you a peek behind the curtain and have a fantastic humanizing influence on them. Not only does it make them more relatable, but in some cases it explains a lot about who they are and how they act. After that, you find the exit, and either Stroud or Hawk has to hold them off for you to get away. This didn't really work for me. Let's compare it to a similar situation. Do you remember this guy?
Beg that I succeed.
Once Corypheus and his Dragon Bro show up, you know that you can't win. The tension builds up by throwing increasingly difficult waves at you, and then slamming you down with something 5 times that size. It works, because up to that point, the largest thing you've fought so far was probably in that last wave. And it's you that's making the heroic sacrifice. In contrast, the Fade area isn't as threatening. By this point in the game, you may have already taken out a few dragons, and whatever this thing is, it's not really as scary as a dragon. The preceding fight isn't too tough, and it just hasn't been built up as an impossible challenge. You look at it and think, yeah, that looks like a fun fight, but all the characters say,
"We need to clear a path!"
So you get away and the Wardens join your side. Sorta. Like the Mages or the Templars, once you get them, they just cheer you on from the sidelines. Sure, there's a couple of war room missions that involve them, but even after you do this, Corypheus still has Grey Wardens on his side at the end. Sure, it all gets hand-waved, but like most of the important actions as Inquisitor, it doesn't really go anywhere. You don't even get a Warden buddy hanging around Skyhold. Oh, you know what I mean. Despite this, the Grey Warden Siege is a solid chunk of story. It's action-packed and effectively relates the scale of the struggle. And the part in the Fade raises delicious questions. After that, you go to foil the assassination of Empress Selene. In many ways, this mission is the opposite of the Grey Warden siege, where on one hand you're facing off against elite soldiers and demons, here you battle with quips and pleasantries. The ramparts are replaced with ballrooms, the swords with wine, duels with dances. And to its credit, it's hard to say which mission is more dangerous.
How you speak to the court is a matter of life and death.
Like the siege, there are 100 tiny touches that elevate it above the rest of the game. The noble favor mechanic works well to demonstrate the unstable attention of the court. Being clever and diplomatic will get you favor, as will some small but very characterful actions, like showing up late for the Empress's address. The best thing that the Masquerade does is that it makes you finally feel like the leader of the Inquisition. All the interactions with petty noblemen trying to gauge you and find out what they can get out of you, trading promises and treaties, even grinding the rumor mill, all make you feel like you're an actual political power. That's really cool, and that's not even the reason you're there. The actual investigation you're conducting fits well into the atmosphere. You're there trying to figure out who's planning to assassinate the Empress in a hall where half the attendees want her dead. As such, you naturally step into the shoes of one of the courtiers and begin to play the great game. Noble favor also acts as a simple but effective way of making you play by the rules of the court. Be smooth and be subtle. You investigate the major power players to determine who the assassin is, and have to navigate the web of lies and intrigue to do so. There's enough going on that it gets pretty murky, and even if your gut is right most of the time, this is the only time in the game where you really feel like the Inquisitor, rather than some upsprung adventurer with a fancy title. When you think Inquisition, this is what springs to mind: investigating and finding the truth. The fact that the game recognizes this and lets you actually get your Inquisition on is awesome. After foiling the plot, you get to play Kingmaker, picking between the three candidates to lead Orlais, with the ever-present diplomacy, espionage, military stance you can take. Now, with the full backing of the Orlesian Empire, you're ready to bring the fight to Corypheus. So the best part of the game should be coming up, right?
This is supposed to make sense. I'm judging a box.
Sadly, that's not the case. You follow Corypheus' army to some elven ruins, but instead of a pitched battle or a huge confrontation, you instead fight your way through a bit of jungle. In Dragon Age Origins, the Siege of Denerim felt like a siege. The end of Dragon Age 2 felt like the city was burning around you. Here you've spent the whole game fighting Templars or mages, on a beach, in a forest, on the plains, in a desert, and now you're fighting the same dudes in a jungle. It doesn't do enough to distinguish this area from all the others in the game, especially since you have no vested interest in this place. You got to see Denerim's hustle and bustle. You spent years living in Kirkwall, and once you got attached to these places, or at least knew about them, it gave burning them down far more impact. Yeah, you want to stop Corypheus, but this jungle is pretty inconsequential apart from the presence of a MacGuffin. The jungle's inhabitants are a race of elves so irrelevant to the story and the rest of the world that they haven't spoken to anyone in thousands of years. These are not sympathetic characters we want to protect. You do learn some cool stuff about the elves of old and how they went into decline, but that just enriches the setting, not the plot. The game's had 100 hours to give us setting, so why at the apparent climax of the game does it want to slow down and give us a history lesson?
Now what was the point of that?
So you get the MacGuffin, run through the convenient exit, and Corypheus stomps on his hat some more. You get away without even fighting Corypheus, which is the main reason you went there to start with. It's 5 against 1, and that's not even counting the dozens of elves who just want to kill this asshole. Even if we can't kill him, at least let us smack him about a bit, let the poor guy do something. In any case, the game swiftly stumbles to its conclusion. You meet back up with your advisors, who must have also teleported back from the battle.
We have no forces to send with you. We must wait for them to return from the Arbor Wilds.
And Corypheus finally gets fed up with being the underdog and kicks things into gear. So he reopens the breach and... Wait, if he could open the breach again at any time he wanted, why wait until now? Now, after he's lost all his military support, is the worst time he could possibly pick to do this. Sure, he's arrogant, but he's not an idiot. If the breach was core to his plans, why not open it up again, say, here? What possible reason is there for him not to open the breach again straight away?
None of this shit makes any sense to me.
Okay, whatever. So he does that, and you go after him. I mean, it's still pretty cool, right? You're going back to Haven. You're gonna get to fight through your old camp, now choked with demons and Templars and shit, right? Oh, or it could be, you know, right there. Yeah, I guess the final battle doesn't really need any build-up. It's not like we just spent half an hour dicking around after that last bit. No, let's just walk right up to the boss. Why not? Sure, this is a desperate move by Corypheus, but it also seems like a desperate move by the developers to close out the game. For a game that's taken its time with everything so far, this ending doesn't really fit. Every other notable event has built up to a climax. Here you say,
either I close the breach again or it swallows the world.
And 30 seconds later, you're punching his face. The ending is one of the most important parts of a story, and if you rush it, it just feels unsatisfying and cheapens the villain. All game we've been told to fear this guy. The path to him should reflect that. The Inquisitor shouldn't say, oh, I guess we'll stomp his face now. Sure, the fight has a couple of cool moments, but by the end of it, not even the Inquisitor is impressed.
What do we do now?
We go back to Skyhold.
That's literally it. That's how the game ends. After 100 hours of gameplay, rising to power and saving the world from an unimaginable evil, this is your grand victory speech.
We go back to Skyhold.
That's the kind of thing you say to your team at the end of a soccer game, that you lost.
That's what I do. Fall out of the sky, make bad decisions, and somehow everyone still follows me.
Afterwards, you have a party like in Dragon Age Origins, you get your slideshow, and the game ends. Still, a party isn't a party without a party. Let's talk about the characters. One of BioWare's strengths is creating memorable characters for their games, and Inquisition is no exception. Every time you're hunting bears or farming elf fruit, these are the people who will keep you playing. They're a compelling cast, each with unique motivations and flaws. Moreover, they're fun to just hang around with.
Go!
Well, mostly. But what makes these characters interesting is what's lying beneath their surface. While often characters in games are basically caricatures, the cast of Inquisition refuses to be pigeonholed. Sarah initially seems like the kooky party member, but is prone to moments of surprising insight.
No, leave that. Not interested in her hidden things. Not for just a bit of fun.
Cassandra is a hardened knight, but also a huge romantic. Iron Bull struggles with who he is and whose culture demands he be. Cullen searches for the strength to fight his addiction, and Blackwall is straight up full of shit.
This is what I am. A murderer, a traitor, a monster.
These are characters with depth. Even once you get to know them, they are still able to surprise you in ways that are totally consistent with their character. They have strengths and weaknesses, they have fears, and they have secrets. These are fully developed people who live in this world, and their presence grounds you in the world and the story far more than any number of codex entries ever could. The story of Dragon Age Inquisition has a lot of great moments, and is full of interesting ideas. It places you at the core of an epic struggle for the fate of the world, and surrounds you with great characters to help or hinder you on your way. It has an amazing villain and an outstanding setting, but it squanders so much of it! So many elements of the game simply do not respect your time. Whether it be gathering ingredients for potions or farming power to unlock the actual parts of the game you want to get to, or just the massive amounts of space to cover in these zones. The pacing shoots the story in the foot. My advice for playing through Inquisition would be to get through it as quickly as possible. But even with all my criticisms, Inquisition has a good story. It might even be a great story. The sad part is, with a tighter focus and less screwing around, it could have been a brilliant one.